Are young people avoiding accounting? And if so, why? Accounting has a reputation for being a safe and stable career path, but is increasingly needing to compete with various other career paths out there. And people nowadays have a lot of choice, whether that's staying in finance, looking at tech, data analysis, even going down the entrepreneurial route. And as of recording this, there is a bit of a talent crisis in the accounting space at the moment, which is getting better, but is very much still relevant. So in this video, I'm just going to dive into perhaps what's going on and why it's happening, and also what we can expect to come in the coming years. So if you're new to the channel, my name's Callum. I'm a chartered accountant here in the UK, and I make videos for new and aspiring accountants wanting to future-proof their career. So if that sounds of interest to you, be sure to subscribe and we'll dive into the topic of today's video. So where are we in the talent crisis at the moment? Well, I pulled in a few facts and figures for this video, and according to the Accounting Talent Index, 94% of accounting firms surveyed say that their ability to grow will be directly challenged by the lack of available talent. Not only this, but 40% of the firms surveyed say they are either very significantly or severely impacted by hiring issues. And as a result of this, over 60% of accounting practices globally say they are now forced to outsource and offshore some of that work. And just to let you know, I've linked all these articles mentioned in the video below, so feel free to check them out. So what is actually going on? Why aren't people entering the accounting profession? Obviously, this is going to come from my own experiences and my own perspective, but I think a large part of this is down to the attractiveness of accounting and the actual brand behind being an accountant. A lot of young people may not see accounting as a rewarding career anymore. When you're faced with years of exams around a full-time job, you can't really blame young people for asking the question, will it be worth it? Now, I've obviously been through the process myself and do believe it is overwhelmingly worth it, and I'm glad I went through it. But I can understand why young people may want to think more critically, given the amount of available options there are out there currently in the job market. In a recent video, I talked about AI and the impact of AI in accounting, and perhaps this may be blurring the lines for young people who are looking at the accounting profession. They may see it as no longer safe and perhaps easily automated by AI. Even though it's not really true, there is that kind of perception that maybe it isn't a good career to get into, and possibly that may be preventing people from getting involved. And this isn't even to mention things like private equity, which a lot of young people may see as sort of a dirty word, you could say, perceiving private equity investment as making the profession more cutthroat and ruthless. I guess this all exaggerates the problem. Starting salaries have also typically lagged behind other areas like law and consulting and tech, which is obviously in the sort of world we live in nowadays, and linking into the cost of living crisis, you could argue a very big factor of why people get involved in a profession. And also in the digital, transparent age we live in, it's very easy to see what other people are up to on social media like LinkedIn or Instagram, and to be honest, quite easy to compare yourself and see the other doors available to you. So with all that said, what are firms currently doing about this? Well, obviously, as I've mentioned, and as some of the articles mention, firms are beginning to outsource and offshore a lot of that work to meet the demand. As I've said, according to the Accounting Talent Index, over 60% of firms globally have begun to outsource and offshore work, and 38% are investing in technological advancement. So that's various tools, including AI, that can help automate some of that work. It's going to be interesting to see what the majority of firms are going to do about this. As I've mentioned, the talent crisis was deemed worse in prior years and isn't a key struggle in this current year, but that's not to say it's not still an issue. And if the sort of systemic issues around the profession aren't resolved, it could lead to issues going forward. I really think the big sort of area that firms can focus on, and even the institutes can focus on, is improving the brand of being an accountant and just making it look more attractive and modern to the young professional. But it'll be interesting to see what is done about this in the coming years. I've sort of touched on private equity, but I do think it deserves its own little segment of the video because it's having and going to have such a big impact in accounting. If you're not aware, a lot of firms are being bought out by private equity firms, or larger firms are consolidating smaller firms together to grow large networks of firms, effectively allowing them to take on more work, access talent, and also economies of scale. Smaller firms are generally the target of of the private equity firms, and it seems like you can't go a week without seeing a new firm being taken over in the media. So why does this actually matter? Well, private equity obviously has some downsides, but upsides tend to be improvements to pay, opening up new career paths, access to better training, and also as accounting has a fairly aging population, these sort of older partners are able to have a succession plan to either sell out their firm to another larger firm or a private equity house. So it gives them a good exit option. Now, as I've said, I do believe private equity is going to be the single biggest shifter in the accounting space in the coming years. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Next up, let's talk about return to office mandates. A lot of firms are pushing for a 5-day week in the office routine now for their employees. But I do think a lot of younger people are generally more inclined to go for a hybrid model where they can go in a couple times a week and work from home for the remainder. Now, I think this really stems down from young people obviously going through schooling, college, university during the coronavirus pandemic, which has impacted on how they perceive work. Because you've got to remember that they've never been through the 5-day a week in the office routine that a lot of people would have grown up in. So they have a very different perspective and mindset towards how work should look. Now, obviously, a lot of firms are still hybrid. They're going for the sort of 3-2 split, which I think will be most common. But as I've said, I am aware that a lot of firms are going towards a 5-day a week in the office routine. Now, I do think there's pros and cons to both, which I'm not going to get into. But looking back at my own career, I learned best when I was in the office, speaking to people in and around different managers and partners. I can see why it's being done. But equally, if young people are being asked to go in 5 days a week, it's got to be the same and consistent for every rung of the ladder. Because if your manager's not going to be in, but you're going to be in, then I can see why young people might question it. Now, artificial intelligence. I've done a lot of videos on this, so be sure to check them out if you haven't. But I really think 2025 was where we began to see a lot of tools becoming more commonplace in firms. And I think the impact on this is going to be great. As I've said, when you look at why young people might not want to get involved with accounting, possibly they may perceive AI as taking over the role and accountants no longer being necessary, which I believe I've debunked in other videos. But it's still about that brand and that perception. I think AI is going to have a real impact on some of the more manual data entry style tasks. I think it's going to replace these, but that's only going to free up time for people to get involved with more judgmental and possibly more interesting areas. So I do think it's going to be a good thing. Just like the internet was 20 odd years ago, I think it's just going to have a sort of similar impact where the role is going to change, it's not going to get replaced. I've also noticed a shift towards younger accountants setting up their own firms. I have personal connections on LinkedIn that I've known do this at a pretty young age in their sort of mid-20s. And I can see why. With the rise of the creator economy, influencers and online business owners, these people want an accountant that they can really relate to and that fully understands their business model, which the young people that have grown up through those businesses tend to have. Starting your own firm gives you flexibility and autonomy, but obviously has its downsides too. Again, it's another option, but gives that trade-off to sticking it out in a firm and progressing up to partner. So to sum up the video, why aren't young people getting involved in accounting? In my opinion, I think it's around the brand of accountants and the perception of accounting. Now, I think AI and private equity is really going to shift the way that accountants work, and hopefully this will feed into the perception and brand of the accountant. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. As I've said, this is all sort of my personal opinions. So let me know in the comment section below if you think there's a different reason for young people not getting involved, particularly because a lot of my viewers on the channel are sort of in the 18 to 25 category. So do let me know in the comments below what your sort of personal opinion of accounting is, and I'll be sure to reply to everyone. If you did find the video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe, and also join the Future Proof Accountant newsletter link below, and I'll see you in the next video.